Well, week 5 is through and done with, and just like the previous weeks, we're in for quite a bit of chaos. This is the most games I've had to cover by far, so forgive me if my thoughts are a little too brief. Nonetheless, let's begin. Miami seems like the only pulse left standing in Tank Conference. Coming into this game as over 2 touchdown favorites, the expectation would be that they would come out at home in front of the 20 people who showed up to kick some ass on a Friday night. Miami quickly came to the realization, though, that they're in Tank Conference, and by proxy, they have to look like ass at some point along the way. Not everyone got that memo, though, as Cam Ward showed why he's the Heisman frontrunner with 400 yards of offense. Despite this, however, he had 2 incredibly boneheaded interceptions, which kept the Hokies in the game. Cam's cousin Kyron Drones wasn't nearly as efficient, but he did what he needed to do to keep them in the game. Miami's defense was very suspect in this game, allowing 400 yards from a team who got shut down by Vanderbilt and Rutgers. Mix this in with a little bit of ref ball incompetence and poor coaching decisions, and you have an ACC masterclass. A game with pathetic coaching that isn't from Mario Cristobal is a rare sight to see indeed. Despite keeping a lead for most of the game, Virginia Tech would eventually crumble from the pressure on the road, and the Canes would jump on it. Down by 4 with a minute left in the game, Tech would have to go all the way down the field to the end zone, and despite John Love nailing a 57-yard field goal before the half, they'd leave it to the Hail Mary. It's been a year since the Canes were victims of the Georgia Tech knee slapper, so my expectations is that the football gods let this one slide in their favor.
Comes down to this. Drones lets it fly. They're sorting through the carnage. Virginia Tech, they roll in a touchdown on the game's final play.
Long live 2001! I would say your playoff run is done, but we all know why it's not. Good luck against Clemson, though. Wait a second. What?
After further review, the ruling on the field is reversed. It's an incomplete pass.
I beg your pardon. Are you stupid? Like, are you actually stupid? It's not the call that infuriates me. Whether or not you think this is a catch is beside the point. The officials called it a touchdown, and unless there's irrefutable, indisputable, 100% clear evidence beyond all doubt against it, you can't reverse it. Especially considering the weight of the call that it was. What the hell is ref ball doing this season? I don't believe that there's a third party that's controlling the officials, but the crowd that does believe it now has every reason in the universe to. Miami got saved. Saved from a loss that could have potentially derailed the entire season. At this point, I'd just say take the entire ACC and throw it in the toilet. Their officials are as incompetent as their teams. From one chaotic ending to the next, Friday Night Football has been on a roll this season. Rutgers is on a collision course as one of the only remaining undefeateds in college football, and with the Huskies coming to town, they hope to keep it that way. Washington doubled Rutgers in total offensive yards, and Will Rogers had over 300 yards, but Washington couldn't finish a drive if their life depended on it. Didn't help that their kicker was like Kadarius Toney if he used hands for feet. Rutgers had way less yards, but was turnover free. Even when something good would happen for Washington, say something like a blocked field goal, it was followed by something very bad, like a freshman running onto the field before a Rutgers touchdown. The Jedd Fisch era at Washington has been very rocky so far, and the pressure is definitely on him considering the royalty Husky fans witnessed the year before. Despite all this though, Grady Gross would get one last chance to be the hero from Washington from 55 yards. Yeah, you know how this goes. Get this team right now is 4-0, who absolutely nobody expected to be 4-0. That team is Army, but also Rutgers. Washington has some serious problems to address immediately in order to at least salvage whatever is left of the season. It starts with tryouts for field goal kickers. Even though Kansas had moved on to basketball season, that doesn't go for all basketball programs. The Wildcats want to prove that their battle against Georgia wasn't a fluke, and with Brock Vandagriff coming back to the gridiron, they would have their chance. Ole Miss has been playing East Popeyes for the past 4 weeks, so now we'd really get to see if they were worth the hype. As it turns out, they're just like Missouri. Way more questions than answers from this result. This game statistically was completely even. Same passing and same rushing yards by the end of it. The Jackson Dart to Trey Harris combo is still going as strong as ever, but not a whole lot else. It wasn't until now that I figured out Gavin Wimsatt transferred to Kentucky, but through him and Barry and Brown, Kentucky was going toe-to-toe with the Rebs. The Kentucky defense had a really good day, getting pressure on Dart just like they did Carson Beck weeks before. Once Lane Kiffin realized that this wasn't going to be a cupcake, he pulled out his trump card. Every drive, Ole Miss players are going down with the case of flop like a fish, which somehow hasn't been outlawed yet. Despite this weak attempt at shutting down Kentucky's momentum, Vandagriff became Brock hard at the end and took Ole Miss down to the wire, leading the game 20-17 with only 2 minutes left to go. Caden Davis will get one last chance to be the hero for Ole Miss from 48 yards out. Wait, haven't we been here before?
They do their job. Kick is no good. A low dunk
Mark Stoops is back! This is the highest ranked road win for Kentucky since 1977 and the last one in Oxford since 1978. A huge momentum shifting win for KFC. Whatever South Carolina did to them, it saved their season. Ole Miss is in huge trouble now, not just because their chance at a potential playoff bid has been derailed, but with another loss like this, Lane Kiffin is going to do like Urban Meyer and fake a heart attack in order to get out of Oxford for Gainesville. You think it's below him? He's done it before! Kiffin is no stranger to that type of action, and though he has already proven himself to be the head clown multiple times through his time as coach, he gets the honors of this week's Clown of the Week. As long as he coaches, these rumors of him jumping ship for another job will continue to envelop him. No pressure to win though. You know those videos where Luigi wins by doing absolutely nothing? Try Michigan wins by doing the absolute bare minimum. Once again, Michigan practically abandons the passing game in favor of their new playbook titled Run a Motherfucker Over. And somehow, it worked. Khalil Mullings had another great day on the ground and practically carried the offense for another game. Watching them against the Minnesota defense was like watching Herschel Walker against their group of preschoolers. Compare this to Minnesota's run game, and you'll see why Michigan ran away with this game so fast. Or at least that's what I would have said if Michigan wasn't completely one-dimensional in the fourth quarter. By this point, Minnesota was in desperation mode and began to close the gap between the scores very quickly. Before they knew it, it was a one-possession game in time for an onside kick.
Nice bounce. Scrambled around. Minnesota's got it. The Gophers have it.
Come on!
Team number 49.
Another game this week was decided by ref ball. I guess Connor Stallions had a part-time job as an official. Who in the world was offsides here? Their vision is almost as bad as Alex Orgy's. What a complete joke. Another ending completely tainted by a horrific officiating. Nonetheless, Michigan's playoff hopes are technically still alive for another week. I sure do hope Michigan doesn't happen to run against a good rushing defense anytime soon. Forcing Orgy to throw seems like the ultimate way to stop them. Both teams here are coming off of disappointing losses who are looking to rebound. Kansas State was cursed by the fans on Twitter, but unlike the Seminole, he actually came through with his promise. If you like being happy, I would highly recommend not looking that up. Besides, all the proof you need is in the results of this game. Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens had a field day on the Oklahoma State defense. Over 500 yards of offense. Turns out if you keep giving the ball right back to them, they'll eventually start scoring. Who would have thought? Someone should tell that to Alan Bowman. Too many teams nowadays are trying to do the approach of getting a fifth-year senior at quarterback who has been terrible everywhere else he's been, but your team is just the right system for him. As the Cowboys are now learning, many of these quarterbacks are just straight-up rhino ass. Because Bowman couldn't complete more than 50% of his passes, Ollie Gordon couldn't run the ball efficiently, and it started a chain reaction where eventually Oklahoma State just quit on offense entirely. Kansas State would prevail and would now get a week to sleep off the jitters of the BYU game. As for Oklahoma State, they might be out of the Big 12 race at this point. Too many shots in the foot. Like Mike Gundy drinking and driving, he's done this 1,000 times in his life. Wait, what did he say? BYU is causing complete chaos in the Big 12. They've hit the projected win total through their first 5 games. In fact, they're 5-0. The spirit that they had against Kansas State kept going through the first half as BYU put the whooping on Baylor. Jake Retzlaff dominated the defense through both the ground and the air. Wait, by the way, did you guys know he's Jewish? An irrelevant detail anywhere else, but quite neat at BYU. Nonetheless, BYU took care of business in the first half. For whatever reason, they decided to make things interesting in the second half because in the Big 12, nothing can be taken for granted. But they managed to survive and have some breathing room as next week they're on a bye week. Sawyer Robinson had a great day with over 300 yards, but without the consistent run game, their efforts at the end were just not enough. Dave Aranda, I'm not sure what else to say to you. Your time is imminent. Depending on whether or not Napier decides to start DJ Lagway, you could be the first head coach on the chopping block in the 2024 season. 2 big road games coming up could very well determine what the near future of the Dave Aranda era will look like. Although it's a mystery to me after going 3-9 last year that he's even made it this long, we'll see if they've got any fight left. Results like these are how you know we are living in one of the most insane college football timelines. Indiana is 5-0. Let me say it again so you can grasp that. Indiana is 5-0. As if it wasn't already enough that BYU's also 5-0. This wasn't some type of fluke either. 500 yards of offense doesn't happen off of a fluke. Curtis Rourke hit that Maryland secondary up with over 350 yards through the air. They had 10 different guys catching the balls for the Hoosiers. That's not an exaggeration either. Look it up. Kirk Cignetti is doing something special with this team. Rebuilding Indiana is no easy task. This is their first 5-0 start since 1967. With the Big Ten East not breathing down their back, things have seemed to have been much easier for this squad. Even the referees agree that Indiana is back. They're siding with them, look at that! We'll see if they can guarantee themselves into a bowl game next week as they play Northwestern. Maryland is in do or die mode now with the 2024 season, as their next opponent is also Northwestern. Well, after a bye week. Nonetheless, I'll be keeping my eye on the Indiana hype train. Built like a true noon Big Ten game, borderline unwatchable for most of it. Purdue is quickly nosediving to being the absolute bottom feeder of the Big Ten. This reinforces that idea. For whatever reason, Nebraska had every intention of keeping them around in the game. It was a complete struggle most of the way through, but thankfully in the fourth quarter, at least one team remembered how to play football. This definitely wasn't Dylan Rayola's best game, but the team was mistake-free, so take for that what it's worth. Definitely helped that Purdue was getting penalized every time a player farted. Nonetheless, the Soilers did a whole lot of sharding in this game and not much else, so it never really mattered much. Whether or not Ryan Walters makes it through the year or not, Purdue is in for a big-time down year. Nebraska is 4-1 now, so time will tell to see if they can find a way to still not make a bowl game. ACC game. Joke's getting old, so we'll get this one over with. Western Kentucky is at least a well-respected Group of 5 team with a lot of potential for the year. No reason at all still for a Power 5 team to go out there and lose to them at home. The Hilltoppers punched them in the mouth early, but the Golden Eagles rallied late to make the comeback late in the game. A respectful dub considering Thomas Castellanos was out for this game with an injury. Grayson James came in, and while he wasn't good, he brought the Golden Eagles to the promised land. And yes, 4-1 for Boston College is the promised land. Or at least Boston College fans are celebrating like it. Yes, it was a win, but quit celebrating like you won a national championship. Wait till you have 6 wins to do that. Identical to the previous matchup you just saw, it's another ACC team going against another highly rated Group of 5 team. This game has also proved that analytics sometimes mean jack diddly hoo-ha. NC State had less than 200 yards of offense in this game, and unless you're Iowa, you're not winning any games like that. CJ Bailey wasn't great either with only 100 yards passing, and NC State's run game was about as existent as Oklahoma State's. Of course, all these statements got omitted when the other team fumbles the ball 4 times. This is exactly what Northern Illinois did. College football is a strange sport, isn't it? One week they're calling for the firing of your coach for getting blown out for Clemson, then the next week they're praising you for barely beating a team that somehow beat Notre Dame. Not all is bright in Raleigh though, as just like this week, you've been banished to the CW network next week where a total of 0 people will be able to watch your game against Wake Forest. Suppose that's what the Demon Deacons get for actually losing to a Group of 5 team. It's Group of 5 warfare between arguably 2 of the best Group of 5 teams. Yes, they both have 2 losses, but those losses are all to ranked Power 5 teams. I've been hyping this one up in my head all week, and I made a massive mistake. Tulane not only was the only team to show up on the field, but they, for whatever reason, decided to play like themselves were a ranked Power 5 team. Daria Mensah lit up the secondary with over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and meanwhile the Bulls' run game completely died. They had nothing to offer other than their souls to the green wave, or the teal wave since that's what they're now wearing. Nonetheless, this team is actually a really good team. Tulane will remain in the race for the 12th seed in the playoffs, and unless they fall off, I'll be shocked if the Pac-12 or Big 12 doesn't pick them up by the end of the year. Whether or not it's a good team or a good program, they are talented enough to compete. Other than Navy, who is also undefeated, Tulane is an easy path to running the table. We'll see if they can live up to my expectations. Color me shocked, USC's defense refuses to show up once again. Letting wide receivers open and watching as mid-tier running backs shred their line? What an occurrence that nobody would see coming! Bear Alexander jumping ship midway through the season was a precursor to another season of Lincoln Riley's defensive incompetence. It takes a lot to make Wisconsin's offense look legit, but here we are talking about the same one that somehow let Michigan's offense run all over them. Despite all of that though, USC's defensive incompetence was drowned out by Wisconsin's offensive identity, which of course is non-existent. Want to know how bad Wisconsin's offense is? This tells the whole story.
And intercepted. Picked off by Mason Cobb. He might take it to the end zone. Touchdown.
Throwing a pick six against one of the country's worst defenses in the country? Stack this on top of Miller Moss having 300 yards in the air, and it's a clear indication that the Luke Fickell hire has been a disaster. What happened? They've gotten worse under him. It doesn't add up, and I want answers. Unfortunately, we have more questions that lack the proper conclusion. Is Lincoln Riley finally fielding a defense? Is USC a contender for the Big Ten? Will the crowd show up for at least one of their home games this season? It's all an anomaly, and will probably remain that way up until they play Penn State. Hopefully the Trojans can cover against Minnesota. As I said last week, Louisville is one of the most forgotten teams in all of college football. They're too good to be clowned weekly, and too bad to be contenders for anything beyond the Pop-Tart Bowl. Now you understand why. The only thing as bad as being sent to the CW network is going to the Peacock, and you got beat on it. The Cardinals were playing catch-up the entire game as the defense couldn't shut down Notre Dame's offense. Of course, this game was filled with another episode of controversial ref ball, which Louisville fans immediately pointed out as to why they got beat. Maybe you should quit coughing up the football and teach your long snapper how to not throw it 12 feet over the punter's head. That might be a great idea. Tyler Shuck, up until now I didn't realize it was pronounced that way, had 100 more passing yards than Riley Leonard, but since the Cards couldn't figure out how to maintain possession of the football, it was a losing battle. Touchdown Jesus has risen again, and ESPN has once again started hyping them up as playoff contenders. They'll be playing catch-up through the entire season though, as they have to win out to make us fans forget that they still have a loss to Northern Illinois. The only thing that erases that outcome is indeed a playoff win. You'll probably still somehow make it because your schedule came straight from out of the Mayfield factory, but by miracle you better hope to get the 5 seed so Marcus Freeman can redeem himself. It's been a rough week for the Sooners. They've spent the entire week trying to discover any moral victories from their match against Tennessee. Meanwhile, the entire wide receiver corps is out for their matchup against Auburn. Unlike many other coaches right now, Brent Venables was quick in pulling the plug on Jackson Arnold's time as the starter for the Sooners. Thus, Michael Hawkins would get his chance to really shine against Peyton Thorne, who, for whatever reason, is still starting. The line seemed like a steal for bettors in Vegas, as this game turned into a major trap for Oklahoma coming into their first SEC road game. Even the cheerleaders were hit-sticking the players. This game was just like the previous game the Sooners played, but rather than incompetent offense versus overly conservative offense, it was incompetent offense and incompetent offense making a baby from the sperm of Kirk Ferentz, which went through mitosis for the sake of having them play each other. Strange analogy, I know, but you get the idea. Both teams struggled to score, and with both offenses playing soft, it was a game of who was going to make the mistake to decide the game. Oklahoma at least became self-aware of their shortcomings and made attempts to work around them as the season progressed. As Peyton Thorne is about to show you, Hugh Freeze has little intention of changing.
Thorne. It is intercepted! Intercepted by Lewis! Kip Lewis, could he? My oh my! Pick six!
Watching Peyton Thorne for Auburn fans must be like reliving Alabama's 4th and 31 miracle over and over and over again. How much longer are they going to have to suffer? Worst part about that is that the alternative is just as bad. Hank Brown was just about as much of a mess. I'm sure you'll be fine though. You've only got 3 road games against ranked SEC teams in a row coming up. Yeah, just go ahead and pack the bubble wrap now. I didn't point this out last week, but Texas A&M almost lost to something called Bowling Green. Why do they keep putting you in the top 25? It's Notre Dame all over again. They're just ranking them for the hell of it. Anyway, their opponent for this week is none other than Pig Time themselves. Coming off a win against Auburn, the expectation was that they could continue the momentum against an opponent who has really had their number. With Taylon Green at the helm, I was convinced that they were going to make it a dogfight. And they did. Le'Veon Moss seemed like the only real threat for Arkansas when it came to defending against the Aggie offense. The only issue is that the Arkansas Razorbacks are fighting against another adversary during the game, the Arkansas Razorbacks. For whatever reason, this team just cannot get out of their own shit. The Aggies were turnover free, while on the other side, Arkansas fumbled the ball 4 times. Green also threw an interception to add on to it. I can't figure out for my life how they keep letting this happen to themselves. It's torture for the Piggies. Arkansas is a villain in their own story. Truth be told, it doesn't help that the offensive line is made of wet paper, but just like the matchup in Stillwater, you were so close. I wonder if this same result will happen next week. I couldn't imagine you playing against a better defensive line than Texas A&M. That would really suck. When I said week 5 is everything, I meant everything, including another rendition of the College Tank Bowl. It's a real shame. With how cool the Kansas uniforms look, you'd think their record would reflect their style, but those two things are part of 2 different worlds. I can't tell if they have more uniforms or losses. Josh Hoover was far from perfect with 2 interceptions, but he was far more impressive than Jalen Daniels. The fall-off of the Jayhawk quarterback needs to be investigated in the College Football Museum. They should have been wearing Stormtrooper uniforms because it would have reflected the accuracy presented on the field. I suppose the Jayhawks have once again committed to being the butt of all jokes in the college football world. Vandy, Rutgers, and Syracuse are at least respectable teams now. You're a homeless team. I actually do mean that though, you are indeed a homeless team. In what was supposed to be a season which shifted the Jayhawk program has shifted back into the dumpster. The Horned Frogs at least prevailed, and since they have a winning record, it's safe to say that they've lined up to expectations. Okay, so it might be time to have a serious discussion about Colorado. Yes, I've been trolling them for their bullshit since Dion got the job as coach, but it seems that there is a legitimate team behind all that bravado. Either that or UCF is actually just terrible. Having a 3-1 record was impressive in itself, but they came to this game as a 13-point underdog. As expected, Shedeur Sanders shredded Central Florida through the air, but the defense actually existed this time, forcing 4 turnovers against UCF. Travis Hunter may not be a Heisman finalist, but he's the real deal. On any of the top 15 teams, he's the frontrunner. No, this does not mean Colorado is winning 10 games and going to the playoffs, but it could very well be a successful year with a bowl bid. And considering all the talk around them, it could be possible that Colorado is a contender for the Big 12. Just maybe though, I don't know, we'll come back to that. I would scoff at the idea before, but based on everything else that's happened, it's not so far-fetched to say they have a shot. Then again, everyone has a shot in the Big 12. UCF's run could potentially be over though. I know this was their first loss of the season, but they've got some really tough games coming up. Now someone please tell KJ Jefferson to take down the Skip Bayless quote in the locker room. You know, I gotta be honest, after getting literally disemboweled by a president, I'm surprised that the Tar Heels have any fight left to give. especially since they're going on the road against an undefeated team. Nonetheless, they gave it an effort. Duke tried to lose this game as Malik Murphy's receivers couldn't catch a cold, and the defense let up a long touchdown on that goofy-ass shovel pass. But through the legs of Star Thomas, Duke was able to overcome a heavy deficit to win the game and keep them undefeated. I've been sitting here for the past few weeks propping up Virginia, Clemson, and Miami in the ACC, but not giving any attention to Duke. Well, to be fair, they were playing East Walmart every week, so it was hard to give them any attention at all, but somehow Duke is 5-0 for the first time in 30 years, which is impressive when you consider the fact that their coach is none other than Manny Diaz. They face off against a battle-tested Georgia Tech next week, so we'll see if Duke can already qualify themselves to a bowl game. As for UNC, it seems the game of football has passed Mac Brown by. Don't be surprised when I say the same thing next week, because they are playing against another undefeated team in Pittsburgh.
I'm done.
Ohio State is the only team among the top ranked that isn't SEC, so they have a reputation to uphold to convince people that college football doesn't belong to the SEC. To say the least, they lived up to it, I guess. Now, I'm pretty sure this is the first time I'm talking about the Buckeyes since they practically avoided all forms of competition for the month, but now I can finally share some words on them. Michigan State, who's no stranger to the Chaos series, had a passing game that impressed me the past few weeks. Even though they got Nick Marsh and Jerron Glover back though, it looked like the entire offense joined them in sitting out. Ohio State's defense smothered Aiden Childs the entire game, and the Spartans had no answers against it. The Buckeye offense behind Will Howard and Travion Henderson wiped the floor with the defense, and if it wasn't them doing it, it was Quinshad Judkins or Devin Brown. Top this off with the fact that Ohio State has arguably one of the best wide receiver cores in the country, with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, and yeah, they just completely sat on their face. People have been wondering what this team would look like against a breadth of competition, and they actually delivered. This could very well be Ryan Day's most talented team, which is an insane comment considering some of these players that have come through Columbus the past 5 years. Right now, Ohio State is the clear frontrunner for the Big Ten by a long shot. Unless Oregon wakes up or Michigan considers using the idea of the forward pass, a 12-0 season for the Buckeyes is definitely on the table. Funny considering if Ohio State doesn't go undefeated in the regular season, fans will be calling for Day's job, which is pretty funny. Please go through with firing Ryan Day and see what happens. I guess that California supremacy arc ended. The standard is the standard, as they say, but the ACC standard is Taco Bell anal juice. Anyway, this is actually quite the surprise. Clemson's offense being the dominant force in their conference games is something I don't usually see. This was the flip of what we usually find out. This is likely part to Dabo Swinney letting Garrett Riley run the offense as he wants to run it, and it's showing. Klubnik having open receivers, 400 yards of total offense, only 1 turnover? What a turnaround for this Clemson offense! The defense was quite the different story though, as Stanford straight up ran it down their throats. 236 yards rushing allowed is very concerning for the future games. If Ashton Daniels were a running back, I'd say he performed pretty good with 150 rushing yards. Only problem is though is that he's also a quarterback who looked like he came straight out of the Auburn class of passing to the other team every drive. Easy to have a great day on offense when you have double the offensive drives you usually do. It's still early in the year though, so anything can change, but from the looks of it, Clemson has taken complete control of a spot in the conference championship. They don't play Miami, and despite Pittsburgh being undefeated, I'm not confident they stay that way for long. Dabo has a major chance to retake control of the conference he used to own. Either that, or he'll be flipping burgers in December. We'll see in due time. And 0 people are shocked by this outcome. Penn State in the whiteout is a hard place to play on its own, but asking Illinois to suddenly play like a different team in this environment is asking just way too much. They didn't get blown out, but when do they ever? It's just another story of the defense doing everything they can to shut down the Penn State lackluster offense, while Illinois' offense falls off a cliff and dies. Penn State was playing far from their best, as Drew Allar in the run game wasn't bad, but extremely conservative as usual against ranked teams. The kicker, for whatever reason, was also playing with negative accuracy, so that didn't help much either. But per the norm, Illinois just couldn't get any offensive momentum. Luke Altmaier was seeing ghosts the entire time, and the run game was non-existent. Whether it's because Penn State's defensive line is that good, or Illinois' O-line is just a complete joke is up to your jurisdiction. Unfortunately, the Fighting Illini don't get the gift of an easy conference schedule like some other teams in the Big Ten do. The next 4 weeks will really tell the tale of what your season will look like. You're still ranked, so take from that what you can get. Well, that didn't take real long, didn't it? Is Florida State still protesting the 2023 playoff snub? Looks like they plan on protesting the whole season instead of playing football. Different verse, same as the last for the Seminoles. Remember before SMU came into the SEC, Florida State was protesting against bringing them aboard because they were above them? Way to expose yourself, clowns. Once again, DJ Ukulele's strings are broken. I find it baffling how he's still being given time to play. Missing open receivers, throwing picks on every drive. Even if there's nobody better than this, at least get your backups ready for the next year. Florida State is so shitty that the toilet they reside in is clogged. Florida is looking at you right now thinking with some sort of optimism that they can win a football game. That's how bad you are. You're still going on about suing your conference because you think you are better than you actually are. 3 of the last 5 seasons under Mike Norvell are losing seasons, and you're one good play from Cal away from being 0-5. The Pony Excess put their backups in, this result was so horrid. If this is really the best that Mike Norvell can do, then you might be better off bringing back Willie Taggart. At least he tried! Until further notice, the 2024 season for Florida State will be known as the Trail of Tears. Where will it end? Only time will tell. I bet FSU man is wishing for it to end now. Well, everything I ever said about the Big 12 is wrong. Other than that, it's going to be an extremely entertaining conference this year. Remember when I said that Utah was going to be the frontrunner of the conference? Seems that now belongs to their Mormon State rival. If anybody. Once again, Cam Rising was out for this game due to an injury, and he's likely heading towards his 8th year of eligibility. Isaac Wilson is there, but that's about it. He's just there. He didn't do anything other than miss receivers and throw picks. The run game that Utah had was lackluster as well, so it would be up to the defense once again. Unfortunately for them, the Fafita to McMillan combo had no intention of dying this week. So yep, Utah was done for. We've seen this in abundance of times what over-reliance on one side of the ball does for teams, and this is just another prime example. The most alarming thing about this game is that Kyle Whittingham, a veteran of the college football world, was out-coached by a first-year coaching staff. The bad play calling through this game was the straw that broke the back of the offense, and ever since, they struggled to get a single first down. Whether or not you think that Utah is fraudulent, nobody watching knows who's going to come out on top in the Big 12 this season. First place in this conference could be last place in 2 weeks. We literally have no idea. As I've been saying though, it'll be an entertaining story nonetheless. The Big 12 ought to be fortunate that the Broncos are not residing in their conference. Otherwise, it might be a wash for everyone else. Boise State is one of the only teams in the country who can afford to get away with not passing the ball. Ashton Jeanty is an absolute machine not seen since the days of Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin. Unlike Colorado, whose potential record deters Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders from getting to be a Heisman finalist, Jeanty is backed behind a decent defense and a much easier schedule. This was one of the hardest games of the year, and they shredded them. Now, it was in part to Washington State turning the ball back over to Boise State every single drive they had, but they were just outplayed by the offense who was just waiting for Jeanty to get past the line of scrimmage. The Oregon game might have not been as much of a fluke as people have been saying. This is a possible frontrunner for the 12 seed. They play UNLV in a few weeks, who of course is going through some drama with their starting quarterback who bailed on them for money purposes. That game will be monumental for playoff implications in my mind. Can you imagine a college football playoff game on the blue field? Ambitious, I know, but that would be really funny. For Wazoo, an unfortunate loss. But hey, you beat Washington, which was really your only ambition for the year anyway. It's Pac-12 Big Ten after dark, and if it weren't for Florida State, I'd say that UCLA's tank is one of the hardest we've seen this season. I wonder if they're missing Chip Kelly yet. Somehow, even though we're already 5 weeks through the season, Oregon is still sleepwalking through their schedule. The overuse of screens, the lack of the ferocity that made him so dangerous with Bo Nix last year, something just seems to be missing. Despite all that though, UCLA is playing Pee-wee level football. The Ducks can basically get away with anything. Eric Bieniemy was supposed to be a home run hire for the Bruins, but the only thing he has succeeded in doing was shitting on the fire some more. Based on the schedule coming up, it wouldn't surprise me to see UCLA be the first Power 4 team to get eliminated from bowl contention. It ain't good for them one bit. Oregon still has some very clear kinks to work out if they want to get themselves back into the championship conversation. Tez Johnson is a great receiver, but what in the hell happened to Evan Stewart? Not sure who they'd be hiding it from, but good luck trying that against the Spartans next week. I don't do this often. In fact, I've never done it before. This game was everything special about the sport of college football. The atmosphere and the level of electricity brought to the table was unparalleled by anything we've seen this season. Between two undefeated teams in the top 5, no less. So in order to give this game what it deserves, I'll be covering it in its own separate video. You can sort of take a guess at which direction I'm going for, and it'll drop shortly after this one, so check it out when you can. Week 5 is over and done with. Of course, I'll still be covering in bulk the results of the game of the century that we had in Tuscaloosa, but besides that, there isn't much else to cover. Thank you to everyone for watching as always, and of course, if you're interested in seeing these videos earlier, consider joining my Patreon. I would highly consider it, and help out the channel, why don't you? Anyway, I'll see you all later as always, and power to Tardaria! Y'all are just trying to get me to feature you, huh? Too bad, you gotta wait 2 more weeks for that.